again, a lot of what I am striving to do in this class, in this lecture set, certainly, is provide a context. I think I've said that enough now. Provide a context for how we as Anglicans, as we as Episcopalians, um, might think about issues, respond to issues that that we might face in our ministry. And we have a lot of background, a lot of history, a lot of tools that we can access as we do this. And that's what a lot of the first part of this class has been about. And now we're putting some of these tools into action. And I want to go back to something that we started the entire quarter with as another tool, and that's the whole question of America's Four Gods. You remember that book? Yeah, it looks like this, something like this. And the reason I bring this up now is because uh, part of what Frazee and Bader, the point that they made was that how we understand God is borne out in how we respond to issues around us. And the exercise that I had you go through to identify who your God was um, puts you in a position to look at the folks with whom you minister, the folks you serve, the communities around you, and recognize that your thinking is not necessarily reflective of all of their thinking. All of you are benevolent God type folk. And so what does that mean? So I call your attention, and if you haven't done this, I would suggest that you go back and read especially two chapters in this book. The chapter on God and morals, and then the chapter on God and mammon. Those two, I think, in particular, get at this issue of social justice. And in the God and morals chapter, the the authors ask the question, or make the statement, and then ask the question that how one perceives God influences morals and how you deal with morals. So if God is loving and forgiving, you might deal with morals in a different way than if God is wrathful or absolutely distant and doesn't care. And so there's a chart on page 66, and I hope you've got the book, that shows this relative morality of hot button issues. And I can't show it to you. I suppose I could scan it and post it there. But what's fascinating is that all of the groups, all of the gods, including atheism, pretty much list these hot button issues: adultery, gay marriage, abortion, premarital sex, and stem cell research in the same level or gradation of severity. It's just in terms of them being always wrong or not wrong at all. As you move along the spectrum, things that are always wrong for the authoritative God become almost always wrong for the atheist. Not always, but almost always. And so these things move down. And so if you look at this chart here on page 66, and you're a benevolent God person, as you all are, look at the gradation in Americans, and see, does this comport with how you understand God, or how you would see uh, the relative importance or severity of some of these social hot button issues. And then, you know, given the fact that everybody seems to see these issues in sort of the same level, would that have an impact on how you might approach tough issues? Recognizing that pretty much we're seeing things the same way, it's just that we may not ascribe the same level of importance to them. Everybody says adultery is wrong, but is it as important for some groups as it is for others, or stem cell research, or some of these other issues? So I encourage you to go back and look at that chapter and see how it might inform some of the stuff that you'll end up doing. Not necessarily in this assignment. That one might show up in the God and Mammon chapter, which is, again, there in the book. You know, and our gods differ, the authors point out, on economic solutions. So, for example, how do we take care of the needy? Who's supposed to take care of the needy, and how is that done? I did a discussion a couple of years ago on the morality of the budget, because we were having in this country a big budget debate. And what do we do with the budget? And on the one side, it was we've got to keep the budget high so that it takes care of the needy among us. On the other side, there were folks saying we got to cut the budget because we can't saddle our offspring, our heirs, with this huge budget. That's an immoral thing. So those are two logical, theologically justifiable positions. They come from kind of maybe different levels of how we understand God. So these things are at work all the time. There's a couple of good charts too in this chapter, one on page 114, and I find this one particularly interesting. It relates the household income to how you understand God. So, for example, the critical God folks average about $57,000 a year in household income. Benevolent God people average $70,000 in household income. And distant God people average $80,000. What does that mean? What does that mean? Given the kinds of congregations you might be serving and the median household income and all those kinds of things, can you make some assumptions? It's a fascinating chart, fascinating to think about. So I call your attention to that. That's really the only chart that's in there. But I also served, I was a member of a congregation in Southern California, Church of Our Savior in San Gabriel, very, very wealthy congregation. My wife was the director of Christian education there. And, these folks drove up to church in Jaguars and Bentleys and Rolls Royces and Beamers. We fortunately could walk to church, so they didn't have to see our cars. But they were there, and they were involved in various ways in terms of stuff, kind of arm's length. But, how are they going to see things? What kind of ministry and mission would you encourage them to engage in, or would you work with them on? So, then again, who's supposed to solve these problems? They talk about, economic problems. And we see that borne out in our American debates, but Frazee and Bader also say that how you perceive God has an impact on how you think these problems, economic and serious problems, should be solved. So again, when you think about the congregations or the dioceses with whom you deal on a regular basis, and the fact that we are not all one economic group, we are not one political party, how are we going to work together to further Christ's work in the world, which is, of course, what we are called to do.